Hey, so I would like to say a massive, massive welcome to our first speaker for UXNZ 2022. So our first speaker joins us all the way from San Francisco in California. Phil Balagtas is the president and founder of the Design Futures Initiative, which is a nonprofit that specializes in futures thinking, such as speculative design and strategic foresight. In today's talk, Phil is going to help us consider a more design-centric approach to policymaking. Fun fact, he used to be a techno DJ. He's pretty sick if you ask me. Hey, let's use the emojis at the bottom of our screens to give Phil a really warm welcome onto our virtual stage. Hi, Phil.
Hi, thank you, Sarah. Kia ora, everyone. Welcome to UX New Zealand. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. I think I graced the stage in person about 5 years ago. I wish I was there with you in person today, but unfortunately I'm not. Hopefully you'll enjoy the talk. It's something I've been working on for quite some time now. Just share the screen. Oops, is that working? All right, great. So it's the title of this talk is The Design of Policy and the Policy of Design. And as Sarah said, I am the president and founder of the Design Futures Initiative. I've been thinking about the future for some time. Maybe some of you were in my workshop yesterday. And as we think about the future and we're thinking about future products and services, we also need to be thinking about policy. And I don't know how many of you actually been involved in a policy making process or designing policy. I surely have not. But if you think about the term policy, it could mean a lot of things. So a few disclaimers or maybe terms and conditions of this talk. I am not a policy expert, though we've talked to a lot of policy experts and we've done a lot of interviews. And I'll be using the term policy very broadly, which will also incorporate terms and conditions and terms and services and all those other crazy things that we tend to ignore when we're designing our products. This is not a speech about politics or government, though we'll kind of talk a little bit about public policy because it's a very complicated matter as well. And it's not a lone effort. There are definitely people out here who are working on this problem, a lot of them in public policy, in governance, and some that are not. So a quick shout out to my research team. I did start some of this work with Sebastian Ibler, who's a design director at McKinsey Design, and Elliot Nenke and Karosh. They might be in the audience. They've also been helping us research and looking at doing interviews and talking to a lot of other people in different sectors to figure out what policy means, what the policymaking process is today. So in the chat, when was the last time you interacted with a policy? And think very closely. Again, policy is a broad term. These are the rules and conditions that we might have to agree to today, yesterday, and if you feel so, tell us what kind of policy. Today, I had to scan my key card to get into this building. That is a policy. That's a policy and interaction and engagement layer that I actually have to do. I have to agree to the security service of this building to get into it. Someone accepted some T's and C's and for this conference as well. Great. Well, most people think about policies, they think about laws or government, right? And that's public policy. That's typically what we call public policy, but they are everywhere. And they govern the way that we use our products and services. In fact, to actually exist as a citizen in any country or state, you have to adhere to the policies that allow you to exist there, to do business, to live and to work, and to just merely have a life. But what are policies anyway? Well, like I said, they're public services and laws. They govern how we operate as a society and what services are available to us. They are also peace treaties. We talked to some people at the United Nations Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, and they are creating policies for nation states to actually collaborate and to agree upon so that there is peace, post-conflict, pre-conflict, whatever it might be. GDPR, some of you who have I'm sure everyone has been on the internet lately and had to agree to the cookies, the little cookies pop up, whether it's a big pop-up or it's a tiny little bar at the bottom of your screen. They are intended to protect your rights. Of course, this came about from the Facebook debacle. The EU instated this policy that all websites that actually traffic through the European Union had to have this. Thus, most of the websites around the world are having to put this little pop-up in agreement. It's a terms of services contract. Terms and conditions. Everyone's had to scroll through terms and conditions and hit OK. They define what the involved parties' rights are. Fun fact, the Game Station website on April Fool's Day had put this little piece of this sentence in their policy. It says here, amongst a bunch of other legalese, it says, you agree to grant us a non-transferable option to claim for now and forevermore your immortal soul. So this was an April Fool's Day joke that they were playing on their customers, and 7,500 online shoppers agreed to sell their immortal soul to GameStation. So be careful what you agree to out there, folks. A sign at a store is a policy. They define boundaries which determine who are served. That is a policy that is instated by the city and by the government on who gets service and for public health as well. In San Francisco, we have these vaccinated signs, masks and vaccination signs all over the place. I hear New Zealand is getting their first 1,000 cases of COVID as well. But in San Francisco, we've been dealing with this for quite some time. And more recently, I could not get into a bar without a booster shot, without showing I had a booster shot. So I actually had to give up one of my concert tickets because I couldn't go to it because I didn't have my booster. Policies also dictate who can have access to products, physical products. So here we have a soap dispenser that doesn't provide soap to people of darker colored skin. Policies don't just have to be a bunch of legalese. They are how we govern our lives, how we govern teams and product cycles as well. Here's another similar soap dispenser that will only that doesn't recognize people of hands of darker colored skin. Here's a pretty bad offender. Nikon, a Japanese company, put this filter in their camera, which is supposed to identify if people blink. And as you can see, they didn't quite test exactly every type of population that this camera filter might be used on. So I dug up this video lately, and it's by Keiichi Matsuda. It's called Hyper Reality. Let me turn the volume down on that. So if you look at this video, it's a few minutes long, but it traces a woman's path through the city, and she's got augmented reality glasses on. Now, I'm thinking about the metaverse now because that's on everybody's news feeds and what the metaverse is going to be. And this is not necessarily the metaverse, though it could be. But you can see all of how saturated this world is with consumerism, commercialism, marketing, advertising, whatever it might be. This is not necessarily a game. This is just a person going to work. And we can think about all of these as little products and services that are going to be populating this augmented reality or virtual world, and all the policies that have to be involved here. Even just to walk in this world, what policies actually allowed this place to be so super saturated? Is this what can happen to the metaverse? And this is why we need to start thinking about the future and how we actually define what governance looks like, and where do we start to draw those boundaries? Policies, among other things, intend to facilitate a service, right? They answer questions and they dictate processes. How we operate, how do we fix a problem, who can use the service, what happens when there's something goes wrong, how can it be terminated, how the money is made, their rights, your rights, and a bunch of other stuff, a bunch of things that we never, ever read. But you know what? Someone is responsible for defining and approving those policies. Who are they? Are they designers? Are they lawmakers? Are they product managers? Are they vice presidents? Is it the legal department? Who are they, and how might they impact our users, customers, society, patients, and way of life? And to understand this is the question we had burning on our mind. Is we had to really understand, what does policymaking look like across many different sectors? And so we talked to product managers, UX, UI designers, content strategists, futurists, lawmakers on Capitol Hill here in the United States, foreign policymakers, lobbyists, a bunch of other people. We talked to people in healthcare and fashion industry, and in different forms of government. And what we found, and what we've been trying to do, is see if there's some sort of commonality between how policymaking is done, what the process is like across these sectors, and if we can find some sort of common foundational understanding of it, so that we can start to apply a new process that's design-led and human-centered, so that we can make sense of this stuff and make it just a little bit more equitable, usable, and just really easy to understand. So we know how to actually navigate these conditions. So here's a generalization. This is the policy layer cake. In every policy, big or small, there's a foundational layer, right? That's made up of country, federal, state laws and regulations, things that have some kind of historical precedence. Laws and regulations that have been put into existence because something might have happened in the past, or they're there to protect a business or a country or some legislation. They're there, and sometimes they can't really be broken. And then on top of that is what we're calling the organizational and business layer. This is the layer that we start to put on top of the foundation, and we can actually, there's some malleability. A business, let's say you are a car rental agency, there are certain laws that you have to abide by to sell a car online or to another human being within the state. Tax laws, commerce laws, all that stuff. But on top of that, we can decide how we sell that car. And that's where we can start to design what those policies are. And yes, they are in words and processes, but that's where we can start to design those things. And on top of all of that, what it's all wrapped inside of is what we're calling the interaction layer. And it's an interface, whether it's the sign on the door, which is designed, or the pop-up window that you have to agree on, which is designed. There is some sort of layer that includes all of that language, and you engage with users or public or patients will engage with. And that's also an opportunity to design something so that we understand what we're actually agreeing to. So the research team has talked to 3 different sectors so far. As we expanded the research. In fashion, of course, a capitalist industry, one of the things we found out, well, we all know this, it's a consumer agenda. That is the agenda that's driving a lot of the fashion industry. But there's lots of really important places to really think about where policy is being created, such as in the production aspect of it, environmental impact, human rights, factory conditions. And then there's the retail part of it, the digital and physical retail and the privacy aspects and the transparency of how those products are being made and sold. In public policy and government, obviously, it's highly, highly political. Rarely are there designers in the process, but there are a lot of institutions who are now starting to invite the design process in. But the design and writing of that legislation, exposing it to the public so that they can understand it, and understand it to the point that they can actually provide meaningful input and actually vote yes or no, is this something that we want, is going to be very important. And then in healthcare, I'm sure everyone has had to deal with billing and insurance. It's, again, lots of massive documents that you have to try and understand when all you really want to do is get some service, get help. And there's a huge gap that we're finding between the public health policy, what is written by the state, and how healthcare organizations and services are actually implement that policy and who has access to it. So one type of policy that we all know well, we might not love, are terms and conditions, or also terms of services. And I felt this is a really good, very practical way to look at policy in a vehicle that we all have to deal with pretty much on an everyday basis, right? And funny enough, there are a ton of memes out there that have to do with policy. If you're a Marvel Comics fan, I just found this one on the top left, me who didn't read it, and the company who doesn't want you to read it. And remember that one, because, as we all know, no one ever reads the terms and conditions. They get ignored so much, just like this little bear in the bottom left corner. Visual Capitalist, they are sort of a data visualization service online. They did a study recently, and they looked at a number of different companies, and they did some measurements on how long it took to read and how many words their terms and conditions consisted of. Pokemon Go, 35.2 minutes, Spotify, 35 minutes, Microsoft, 63 minutes, and Macbeth by Shakespeare, it will take 1 hour and 11 minutes to read 17,000 words. Now, from what I remember reading Shakespeare in high school, I felt like it took more than an hour. I felt like it took a whole semester to actually read that. But that's what it actually consists of, 17,000 words. So they're too long, first of all, and that's why we don't read it, because we don't really have time to read it. And they're very complicated. As we know, a lot of it is built in with the legalese and legislation, all kinds of stuff. And we talked to Anita Chang, who is a content designer at the San Francisco Digital Services. And she says her rule of thumb is always aim for a 5th grade level reading level. A lot of these T's and C's that exist are for, high school and above. And it's not that you have to be it has to be that only college people, that they're specifically intentionally designed for college level. It's just that no one ever actually pays attention to the language or cares that, not the 5th graders are a primary target for some of these, but you have to make it understandable and comprehensible as well. They're not always contextually relevant, right? You download a new app and you don't want to read this stuff. So you just want to get through it, and everyone scrolls through it and hits okay. And all right, here we go. We're in there. So policies are not always designed as a dialogue. And they're not designed to be. There's never an intention to make it a dialogue, but yet it's the gateway to using every single service in the world, right? I mean, it's sort of your golden ticket. So why not design policies, the words, the language, the interaction layer, the way that we design products, right? And so this is our first real response to this is, can we start to apply design thinking, human-centered thinking to this process? So it starts with a really good, robust discovery process, right? Understanding what a lot of this foundational requirements are. And of course, it's going to take some time to try and figure out, like, why is this here? Why is it written like that? I mean, and maybe hours of reading it. And it's not necessarily something we do, but we do lots of research anyway, right? Inviting the right people to the table, making sure that it's inclusive and diverse, and making sure that the people who are impacting it, and if it's a public law, that's pretty much everyone in your society. Some representation of that is at the table or can speak pretty fairly for that population. And then after that, you're sort of defining the strategy and defining what the success criteria is, and considering from a futures perspective, what are the long-term implications of this policy? What are the short-term implications? Because we might have to get the policy out the door because a product is due to be deployed, but also how does it evolve over time? Because we all know that ethics and values and morals and principles are a social construct. We construct these and agree to how society lives, what's okay and what's not okay, ourselves. We all sign that social contract, that social policy to operate in this environment. And it should be malleable, and it should be okay that it will evolve as our society evolves over time. Then there's the actual designing of the content. Not necessarily something that an interaction designer or user experience designer is involved with, but why not? Why can't we understand the content more? Why can't we actually, why does it have to be the content strategist or the copywriter's job to actually design the words that we are interacting with on that modal so that we understand it better? Can't we design that better? And that's something that I'm hoping that, over time, designers will start to evolve into, is that we are designing policies. We're designing words. We're thinking about the actual words that are going down on that piece of paper and how they impact people and how they could be both the threats and the opportunities that exist around that policy. And then business as usual, we design the interaction layer, whether it's a person standing at the door checking your temperature, or a sign. And even though the sign might just be graphic design on the door, where is it? Can we put some intention around how we actually display that information, the words that are being used, how someone actually has to scroll through something, and how much time it takes, and is it contextually relevant? And pilot it and iterate and prototype it and put it out into the world and make sure that it is malleable, just like we do other products. We throw it over the fence, it breaks, let's fix it again. It's not you're stuck in this world and you hit okay, and so you're sort of in danger now. And continue to monitor that and create KPIs and feedback. And again, it's a looped process. So like I said, there are people out there who are working at a public policy level who are doing this. John Sweeney and Stuart Candy created this WhatsApp futures game, What Futures, where it was designed for the Red Cross to engage Red Cross youth volunteers in sharing their hopes and fears of the future, to include their voices in shaping the Red Cross strategy over the next 10 years. And I think this was done around 2020 or so. So that's a fun gamified way of gathering input early in the discovery process so that we can actually shape that policy, and including the right people in the room, right? The children of today are the adults of 10 years from now, the future. But not all policies are painful, or T's and C's. And there's some people who are really doing a good job of this. So 500pixels.com offers two versions of T's and C's. You've got the long legal version, the description of the service, and then they say, basically, here's two sentences. You can read either one if you want. It just simplifies it. They can respond to changes in the market. If you're using Uber in your country or city, now you have to agree to wear a mask and that you're going to abide by the COVID public safety laws. I was riding an Uber recently, and in the midst of the ride, my mask fell below my nose. I didn't realize it because I was on my phone, and I got a notification from Uber saying, don't do that. Next time you call an Uber, you have to take a picture of yourself before you can actually ride the service. They can be, and maybe should be, contextually relevant. So if anyone's using the latest version of iOS, in certain instances, when you're about to start up a new app, It'll have this tiny little window with just a tiny little bit of text and says, hey, you know what? This app's about to track your location. It has one topic, one specific intent, and you say yes or no. So I get it, because that's what I'm about to do. It's contextually relevant for what I'm about to actually engage in. And now I actually want to read it, because, well, I have to, but it's small enough and I can understand it enough so that it works for me at that moment. Or they can be interactive or gamified also. This is Revel. And Revel is a scooter rental service in San Francisco and probably other parts of the world. And to rent your first scooter, you have to do this survey where you have to answer each question at least, I think, 2 or 3 times correctly. And if you get one wrong, it just moves to the next one, and then it'll shift that one back into the mix later. And I think there's like 25 questions or so. And after having to go through this process and getting things wrong, you start to really learn the rules of the road. You learn the city rules and regulations of how to ride a scooter. You learn Revel's, remember the organizational layer, the business layer. You learn Revel's regulations and policy of how you're supposed to ride their vehicle, and you get it. And it's a little bit gamified, but you understand, because you've got to read it and understand it and do it correctly. And here's where we start to elevate policy into a marketing campaign and part of the value proposition. Privacy policy is now part of Apple's main campaign. That is what they are selling you. They are selling you their policy. They're selling you not just a great product, but this is what they've elevated. It's not just about the camera anymore, though there's still a lot of shot on iPhone ads that are out there. But this is why they want people to buy it, because we protect you. And while they still do have lots of very long legalese and everything, they've elevated this, made it very simple. Privacy, that's iPhone. That's it. It's a value proposition. So some suggestions here, which I've mentioned throughout the talk. Let's start to reframe the current policymaking process, no matter what sector you're in, to include design. And even if you don't include designers, think about the design process. Again, human-centered research, talking to the right people, not being objective and not subjective, and being fair. Be sure inviting all those people to the discussion. Think about whose agenda is really being prioritized here. Is it the business? Is it the consumers? Whatever it might be, and really try to investigate that if the right agenda is being prioritized in the creation or modification of this policy. Do some futures work. Consider the short-term and long-term implications. Think about how it can ultimately create value, much like Apple, for your users. Write and design those policies to ensure accessibility, readability, comprehensibility, whatever it takes, so that your users can understand it, even at a 5th grade level. Incorporate your organization's values and culture, because how your organization and your team and the product management team or your product cycle operates is built on a policy, right? Our policy of releasing great products that are for all exists, right? Whether it's written down somewhere, how we do things and who checks off and says yes on that thing is a policy that you live and work by. And make sure that they're adaptive, again, to users' needs and society's needs as we go through time. Now, the second part of this talk was the policy of design. And think about, for yourself, as a designer in the industry, what is your policy of design? What are your terms and conditions for actually operating and designing great products for the world? I mean, there's some great things like changing behaviors, creating delight, preserving human life, reduce harm, reduce friction, create business value. And these might sound like principles, values, morals, but that's what policies are. That they are how we operate and how we live. So think about this, and this is sort of the reason that we should be part of this process, or at least influence or help this process along. And I hope we can start thinking about all of these kind of invisible web of things that govern our lives a little bit differently, and design them better. Thank you very much.